the form being recorded. So I think the first meeting item for this variance hearing would be to define a chair of the board. And the board is consisting of a representative from the health department, which is me, Summer Day, and a member from the engineering department, which is Gary Myers, and a representative from building, which is Stan. And so the three of us consist of the board that will vote on the variance at the end of the day. We haven't met formally for, probably 2.5, 3 years. So at current, we don't have a chair, and I think we need to vote on that chair. So I move a motion to vote for a chair.
First, everything, probably should get my last name in there.
Okay.
Stan Burnish.
Do you want to circulate a sign-in sheet because this is a public meeting?
I think we need to, yeah.
Probably a good idea.
So I think we need to also second the motion.
Thank you. I would second that motion.
Okay.
But if Gary would send something around, that'd be awesome.
Can we be doing this parallel with the sign issue? Do we need to vote for that? Because let's go with it.
No, I think we'll.
Just one hand, is that yours?
So I would make a motion for Summer Day of the Morgan Health Department to serve as the chair for this committee.
I'd second that motion.
Okay, and I'm willing to do that. So, okay, so the signing sheet is going around, if possible. Let's place some type of role or agency that you're with, if it's for the applicant or Huntsville Town Water, that would also help us. And once that goes around, we'll get into the business of this meeting.
Did you guys by chance list who you're representing?
I did.
Yeah.
And we can recirculate it in that
Yeah.
direction.
I did not.
Here,
I certainly
I
can.
don't know who this gentleman is.
My name is Van King. I'm a hydrogeologist,
Okay, I've
King
heard all-
Water Resources.
Summer, for the recording, my name's Cortland Erickson. I'm a deputy county attorney with the Weaver County Attorney's Office, and I advise the engineering division, and so I think that's kind of how I came to be involved with this. I'm not a member of the technical committee, but I will provide any legal advice that they require to them in fulfilling their duties. And I might just mention very briefly that this technical committee was established by a county ordinance that does not give a great deal of detail to the technical committee in terms of how to operate its proceedings. So we are operating under the provisions of the Utah Open and Public Meetings Act. Beyond that, there are not any formal rules of procedure that have been adopted or anything like that. And so it's basically going to be up to the chair how to run the meeting. The overarching concern here is to make sure that the committee has facts in front of it to enable it to determine whether or not a variance would be appropriate in this case, something that would deviate from the requirements that would ordinarily apply to this type of application and drinking water source protection requirements under the county code. So the authority would be limited to a variance from county code requirements. They obviously don't have authority to order or permit any kind of variance from the requirements of any other agency of the state or anyone else. And in terms of public comment and input, that's going to be up to the discretion of the chair. It is something that they would determine whether do they need expertise from others. And I think the only bit of advice I would give there is to make sure to focus in their decision on facts and evidence instead of speculation, hearsay, what we call public clamor. But other than that, again, I don't have any technical expertise whatsoever. I don't vote, but that's kind of a overarching, I guess, basis for this meeting.
And is the recording being used for minute taking? Yep. Should we go around then and just really quickly say our name, our position, or who we're representing? We can start with Felix at this side of the table.
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Felix Yavarino. I work with the planning office, just here as mostly support, and we've got some planners here to take, get the minutes and get this documented.
I'm Summer Day with Environmental Health for the Weaver Morgan Health Department, and I'll act as chair for this.
I'm Gary Myers, Weaver County Engineer.
Kurt Summers, I'm representing Infinity Call, kind of the excavator on the job, doing all the development.
Van King, I'm a hydrogeologist. I delineated the drinking water source protection area for the wishing well, which is a well that has been drilled in close proximity to the springs. And I've also been retained to redelineate the source protection area for the complex, the spring complex.
I'm Bill White, Huntsville Town and Water Committee.
I'm Ron Galt, Huntsville Town Water Committee. I'll have the responsibility of updating the source protection plan once we get the data from Van King.
Stan Murray, we've got a building official and technical committee member.
Cortland Erickson, Deputy County Attorney.
Miranda Menzies, I'm a resident of Ogden Valley. I am also the chair of the Wolf Creek Water and Sewer Improvement District, but I am not representing the position of the district at this meeting. I'm representing the community and myself as a citizen.
I'm Marta Borchert. I work in planning and I'll be taking the minutes.
And I'm Chad Meyerhofer in the Weaver County Engineering Department.
All right, so for the first matter of business, we're gonna have the representative of the applicant present their variance requests and their arguments for that. Everything that you would like us to consider for technical review as to reasons why allowing an on-site wastewater system in the zone 2, or what is currently delineated as the zone 2 of the Bennett Spring Complex, should be granted a variance. I'm kind of give you guys the platform.
So yeah, we're just trying to build a house up there. And been working with Huntsville Town and Van King here and just trying to move forward with the process. We do have stuff on pack bed media systems and all that stuff that would help reduce the total nitrogen. It's not gonna get a point to the 2.5, but it's gonna get it down to the 12, the 13 area. We should be, like I said, we're trying to move forward and get the zoning change from the 2 to the 3.
No, I do not.
Okay.
So it looks like Kurt Summers just provided us with, the Advantex performance summary for the proposed on-site wastewater system technology that the applicant is proposing to use, which reduces nitrogen on the output. Kurt, would you like to, and I apologize, what did you say the reduction was?
So like if you go to the second page, it has it at the first tank, the actual septic tank, showing it as 38. And then it has on the next thing, the mean basically add a pipe, and it takes a reduction of 63%.
Okay.
You said that was 38 parts per million coming out of the septic tank?
It identifies it as milligrams per
Total.
liter.
Milligrams per liter, same
Total
total.
nitrogen.
You said 60? 38.
It's like 30%, yeah, 63%.
And maybe I'll clarify, and, I want to make the statement that this wasn't presented as part of the variance for us to review preemptively to this meeting. So, I think what I'm hearing Kurt say, they have something listed as processing tank effluent, and you're asserting that's the septic tank? Does that seem correct?
It just says that tank influent. And then the back there's the second tank. Right here.
Okay, so this is why I was confused. Okay, so it looks like the third page of this technical document shows the septic tank effluent with a mean value of total N at 38 milligrams per liter. It shows with the advantex effluent reduction, it says percent reduction is 63% of total N. Does anybody need me to repeat that information? Did that seem like it translated?
But are they saying that it goes down from the 38 by 63%?
That's what it appears to say. Again, apologetically, we have not been given this to review the document comprehensively before. Is there anything else that the applicant would like to present as part of this?
Honestly, I've never done one of these before. I have a letter from Huntsville Town. Everybody's seen this? You've seen the letter from Huntsville Town.
I have a copy of that, thank you.
And then I just also have a letter from Van King written.
And is that part of the record? Or have you had an opportunity to review that? It's a letter that I wrote February 8th is the date of the letter.
I think for just cohesion and transparency, I'd like to go through the documents that we have as part of the variance request. And I don't know if it's easy to pull it up on Frontier. So you guys can just confirm.
We don't have it in Frontier.
What we have
It
is, we have an initial letter from Huntsville Town dated November 14th, 23, which just has kind of a general support for the system being placed in that zone 2. We have the variance request from Whitney Call, which apologetically, I don't see a specific date on that, but that is recorded in Frontier. We have a document titled Review of Drinking Water Source Protection, Huntsville Town Public Water System, and they give the number for that proposed septic system and drain field. And that was from King Water Resource, which is represented here. In that, there are some additional maps and delineations and some information about both the source protection zones for the wishing well, as well as the Bennett Springs, but it focuses on the wishing well. And then it also shows a well log of the new wishing well. And I believe that is what has been proposed before today as part of the variance request. Okay, Dan, you have the floor.
Well, so in that letter, we outlined there are a number of things that address the risk-related issues with septic systems within source protection areas. When we drilled the wishing well, we learned quite a bit about the aquifer system. Of course, the springs are pre-existing. The well is drilled as an additional source, tapping the same aquifer system. And what we learned is that there was enough data collected through performance testing and so forth that we could limit that zone 2 area, which we did, and it was reviewed and approved, concurred by the Division of Drinking Water, Utah Division of Drinking Water, the source protection section. It's that same methodology that we're proposing to use as we go forward. And I've had some preliminary discussions with the lead of the source protection section at the state, and we have pretty high confidence that a replacement delineation for the springs will look very much like, and I've actually done that work, it's on that, and you haven't had a chance to review this yet, but it's on that drive. The replacement zone 2 will be in closer proximity to the spring sources. And the call property will be actually in zone 4. Zone 3 boundary is even closer to the sources. So, you know, based on what we learned through drilling, through performance testing, and the number of other things, it'll look much different in the future.
So, can you please explain the methodology for delineations, as there's some non-technical individuals in the room who really don't understand what the nuances of this are?
Yeah, so the methodology we used here, it's sort of a two-step. The outer boundary, we use hydrogeologic mapping. And this is the outer boundary, the zone 4, that's the blue area. Difficult to see at the scale, but that aligns directly with what was approved and concurred with by the Division of Drinking Water for the Springs many years ago. That was done by others, but it was a viable approach. They didn't have the ability at that time to stress the aquifer. These are springs. This is just ambient flow. It's just flow coming out. Once we drilled the wells, we're able to do groundwater modeling. And these are fractured rock aquifers, and you see the brown and the red, those smaller zones. That is largely based on a modeling technique, groundwater modeling, to identify what based on a time of travel, that a molecule of water, how long does it take to get to the point of extraction? So we use that, and what is different here that has not been shared yet is that red area. That's that is the new zone 2 that we will propose to the Division of Drinking Water. And then, what can I step up here? I'm trying to describe these things. The call property is here, and this is, again, in zone 4. This is zone 3, the brown area. There is an existing septic system there, which is closer to the source than the proposed property. And then the new zone 2, again, is the red there. Any questions on that methodology or otherwise?
Is that mud flow you use?
Yeah, we use it's not mod flow. It's an EPA program, WAPA, that is used to delineate source protection. It's a code that was developed for this purpose, 2-dimensional model.
So, and I'd like you to have an opportunity to propose anything additional that you'd like us to consider, but just to kind of clarify. So my current understanding is that the old delineation process for the Bennett Springs, what has been in place, was a delineation method that allowed for a point 2 miles above the springs to be identified, and then it created a watershed. Do you know, and if you know more on that, it might help.
0.2 miles.
Or 2 miles. It's a, do you know how the?
Oh, so you're talking about yet another methodology. So that approach is very simplistic. It's just it would be a circular area that the state would probably approve, but it doesn't take into account any site-specific information. So no, we didn't follow that approach. This uses information that we've collected in the field based on the lithology of the aquifer, the fractures, all those parameters, porosity, hydraulic conductivity, transmissivity, aquifer thickness, all of those things become part of that assessment and are reflected here. So that I think the methodology you're talking about is very simplistic.
Yeah.
It's just it's a bullseye.
And maybe what we'll do is I think we'll give Huntsville an opportunity to speak and kind of ask them what the history of the previous delineation is. So Vance, are you proposing that you feel, oh, Van, excuse me. Van, are you proposing that you think that the aquifer, that the water, the Bennett Springs, as well as Wishing Well are the same, and that the travel time for everything should be fairly consistent?
Yeah, in
is
fact,
that
we
what's being
know
stated?
they're connected.
Okay,
We've seen declines in the lower spring from extractions from the well. So we've measured spring discharge at the same time. We have not seen as much interference or any on the main springs, Bennett Springs, because it's a complex. There are 3 points of discharge from the spring system, but collectively we call them Bennett Springs. There is some interconnection, and so the methodology we use on the well very much applies to the springs.
anything else that, as for the representative of the applicants, that you guys would like to bring forward for consideration before we move on?
Just if Huntsville Town would like to say anything?
You had asked a question about the previous study, which is based upon some information that we gathered in about 1999 to produce our original source protection plan. And at that time, we were building our treatment plant, which we had nothing prior to that. So we had no evidence, nor were we doing anything to treat the water besides injecting a little chlorine in it as it migrated down to the town. So we had a part-time operator hired, certified, state certified water treatment operator, who was helping us with the plant, bringing it up to speed and operating it. And she prepared the source protection plan. And I think in simplistic terms, she followed a contour using, as Van said, an approximate distance, a radius of the circle, and followed the contour. And it looks to be a watershed. It looks like things all flow in that direction. And that's all the data that we really had to produce that plan at the time. That's all that we had used for our updates. Mainly our updates for the next 20 years were just identifying any new property owners in the area and contacting them and telling them they were in our source protection area, etc. So it was until we drilled the wishing well, we didn't have any what I would call scientific data.
Okay. Bill, in a previous meeting, you had described reduction of water flow being pulled from the Bennett Springs and more, basically a larger percentage of the water being pulled from the wishing well. Can you discuss that?
Sure. The source of water, culinary water for the town of Huntsville, originates on some property that was the historic monastery farm. And when I purchased a farm from the monks, I sort of became this part owner of this spring complex system, which we use mostly for irrigation. So the farm that I own owns most of the water out of that spring complex. And so I became really familiar with it. I was also asked by the town of Huntsville because I'm a water rights attorney, to work with them and help them to understand their water rights. So when I'm going to try and make this short, but when I was asked to do that by the mayor, I discovered that Huntsville town did not have a redundant source of water. So I talked the town into hiring Van King to help us figure out a way to develop a second redundant source of water. In the process of doing that, and this is making a very long story short, we drilled a wishing well and discovered that it was a really great source of water, much more reliable. It's cleaner. The wells drilled very deep. And so the town of Huntsville has been using that as its exclusive source of water since it was drilled about 5 years ago. But when we were doing the testing, we were monitoring the spring complex, and there was a direct correlation. The higher we pumped the well, immediately the effect on the springs was felt. So we were able to determine that they were coming from the same basic source of water. And so we have agreements between myself and the town regarding how much water they can pull from the wishing well to make sure it doesn't dry up our source of water. But so far it's worked really well for both of us. And for the past 5 years, the town of Huntsville has been exclusively using the wishing well for its source of water. It does have the option, it doesn't have the desire, it has the option of incorporating the springs back into its culinary system. And I have by contractual right the option of forcing them to do that, but I have no incentive to do so. And so one of the things that came about through this process is the town of Huntsville didn't realize that it was encumbering, thousands and thousands of acres of people's private property in such a way that would, eliminate any possibility of them building a home. And when this came to our attention, we immediately hired Van to start this process of redelineating this source protection zone for the springs, now that we have the data. The other thing I would like to point out is that Huntsville town has multiple layers of protection for our culinary water source, namely being our very sophisticated water treatment plant. Besides the fact that when this new delineation goes into place, Whitney College property will be in zone 4. We also have the added protection of this fabulous water treatment plant to clean up any water process, besides the fact that now we're pulling water from a well that is pristine in quality. So we feel like this is not a problem for the town of Huntsville, and we just want to make it clear that we're supportive of this variance request.
Okay, I was gonna ask what your recommendation was. Do you know if by regulation from the Division of Drinking Water are 2 sources required for a water system? I don't know the answer to that.
For water system this size, the answer is yes.
Okay. And do you know what your total flow currently that you guys, your demand flow rate is for the town?
On an hourly basis, a daily basis?
However you want to represent it.
The plant can run up to about 200 gallons a minute. We routinely are running under 100 gallons a minute.
And the wishing well is currently able to provide how much flow do you think? The full 200 or?
It easily makes that,
Okay.
that it satisfies that demand, right?
Yeah.
Without problem. And I can say that because we monitor the water level, and if there's overproduction, it would show and the water level would decline with time. In this case, it's maintained, and it actually is flowing well.
So is it, what kind of max flow, what are we saying as far as drawdown, or are you remaining static?
Yeah, it's a flowing well. It returns to that static flowing condition after water is diverted, right? Is that true, Ron?
Yes.
Yeah, so most of my data is from a couple of years ago, but it sounds like it's holding in there.
Did you say it's a flowing well?
Yes.
What is the static flow rate?
When we first drilled it, it was well over 100 gallons a minute, but I imagine it's.
Well, and I might add, we have a 1 million gallon storage tank also. So, immediate flow rate is not as big a concern. So we try to maintain that tank at least 500,000 gallons. So we can easily go days without any flow.
One last question, your complex treatment system, obviously there's concern with septic system, phosphates, nitrates are the big ones that we know exist in septic systems. Anything in the treatment facility that you have to specifically address that you'd like us to consider?
That's not an answer I can give you.
That's okay.
And I'm not a treatment person either, but
we have 3 methods of filtration because we were and I believe still the only facility in the state using a multimedia filter. We have a large dual tank multimedia filter, which we put the water through. We then go through bag filters, which are, I believe, close to 1 micron. And in addition, we then go through cartridge filtration. So we have triple filtration.
Plus chlorination.
And of course, chlorination.
Okay, and then, and you may not know the answer to this, what's your frequency of sampling? You guys are doing monthly sampling for some things and then maybe annual samplings for a more complex panel?
We do both. And sometimes even weekly sampling if we have any questions. We again, our current certified water operator usually shows up on the weekend and does sampling every weekend. We're meeting all the state requirements on sampling.
Stan or Gary, do you have any other questions for these guys that you can think of that have been brought up through conversation?
Just one question I had as we were doing this, what level of monitoring of the water aquifer took place over the last few years as the drought affected? Did you see a significant correlation between the drought we're recently coming out of, if you want to say that, or over the last maybe 5 years that you've had the well in operation?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not an actual meter on the monastery side of the pipeline, but I can extrapolate a little bit for you, which is in years past, and we do have some data for the town of Huntsville, because the way it works is when the spraying starts out in the spring, it's gushing 10 CFS.
Sure.
And then as it drops down late in the summer, sometimes we get down as low or just under 1 CFS, in which case then the water division between the monastery and the town is very precise. And during the time period that the town has been drawing exclusively from the wishing well, that bottom level, as you say, even during the drought, was pretty static. I mean, we were still seeing reasonable flows over 1 CFS, even in the late summer, which was typical in times past. Our big problem was the other source of water for the monastery, which is the Causey Reservoir, was in jeopardy. But the spraying surprisingly held steady. The spring has a surface influence in the spraying time, which is pretty severe. I mean, we get pretty brown water. The town of Huntsville is drinking brown water for years during the springtime. But then it seems to be pulling from the deeper aquifer late in the summer, where it remains pretty constant. And I haven't seen any drop in that since they've been using the wishing well, because I think there's adequate water, because their well is flowing. It's just like adding another spring to the system. And the 2 springs that are just up from the well were more severely impacted when they turned the well on and did their pumping at, I think, 500 gallons a minute. And the upper spring was not as severely impacted by that, small impact. But now that we're just running on everybody just free flowing, we aren't impacted to the point where we would recognize it. But like I said, we don't have an actual meter. We are going to be putting a meter on there, not this summer, but next summer, as part of the revamping the pipeline project. But we don't have any, flow data on that, other than visual.
Stan, any questions for you?
I think most of my questions have been pre-answered, other than what I did put out there. So I'm fine.
Are you guys thinking of, obviously, from what I'm hearing, you have a strong belief that the delineation used for the wishing well should correspond highly with the Bennett Springs. And you're thinking that you'll be proposing that to the Division of Drinking Water in some type of time frame? And what I'm really asking is, if you were to use a different methodology for delineating the Bennett Spring complex, any tentative idea as to when that might be proposed to the Division of Drinking Water?
I'll let Ron answer that.
Yeah, I've approved Vance completing his data gathering, and our intent is to republish our source protection plan for the springs. And I'm hoping to get that done by the end of this summer.
Okay.
Again, this is on volunteer time.
And the reason I asked that question is my current understanding is that you guys are on a 5-year rotation where you have to maybe submit reports to the Division of Drinking Water for your source protection, probably saying all identified potential sources of contamination, and then likely submit the delineation. You don't necessarily feel that you'll wait for that 5-year period if you're ready before with this delineation?
I'm more motivated
That
that
a
way.
little bit. Yeah, so there are two ways to approach this. One would be to wait for that time when there is a update due. The town's not proposing that. What they're proposing is a replacement source protection plan. So it'll use all the newer technologies and so forth that we have available. And it will be a redelineation of any new potential contaminant sources that may have moved into the area. Although that's been captured incrementally through those 5-year updates. This will be a snapshot in time, and it'll have management plans for any future additional PCSs. It'll have management plans for those existing. It'll be a new plan, replacement plan is what they call it.
Okay, anything else before we open up for public comment? All right, okay, we're gonna open up for public comment.
I have only one question, which is what is the current nitrate level in the springs and the well? Are they identical and what number is it?
We submit that every year. I don't think I don't have a copy of our most recent. It is public information. We do
Okay.
submit it.
I can get it.
And it is in
Yeah.
compliance with state and EPA requirements, but I can't tell you off the top of my head.
And maybe to also help with that, that pointed question, I mean, obviously it's valuable information, but was it also a question to see if they had seen any increases within
It strikes me that this situation, there are so few sources there. I don't see this as an issue. But if you have somebody who in the future wants to put 100 houses up there, you've got a different level of issue. So while one variance is not an issue, and it's good to know what your starting point, your baseline number is on the nitrate, and then you can watch that to see if there is an increasing influence over. I think Summer is fully aware, and she has the data that I've been taking all the way around, and all the flowing sources coming into Pineview. The average right now of what you can do it as a geometric average or as a straight average, it comes out at about 1.5 for groundwater going into Pineview, which obviously is not high enough lumber to be an issue. The background coming down out of the mountains is like 0.2 usually. So that's the number I would expect. So if you're seeing, and my experience as an environmental consultant and hydrogeologist when I was working a long time ago, was that you with springs can have influence from a long distance away. And Van, I'm sure, would believe that if you have a true karst system. So you can have a contaminant that is coming in from miles away that suddenly pops up because you have flow systems within limestone geology. But if there is no current nitrate, then I would say that is a good place for us to start.
All right, at this time, I would move to that the board should vote. I need a second on that.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion that needs to be had by the board members?
Nothing further. Study of the information provided is required. I would propose a vote that we table this until the committee can look at the data provided and receive any new data from the applicants in town of Huntsville before making a vote.
And just to clarify, are you thinking nitrate samples? Is that what you would like to review for additional data?
Nitrates along with recent information provided as far as the type of system that they are going to install. My two biggest things I'd like to drill down on a little more.
Okay.
Could I comment on the nitrate piece still? Recognize that the treatment plant, the town has the obligation to provide water that meets drinking water standards. So whatever that nitrate level is, it will need to meet the drinking water standard at the point of entry into the system. So it's very important to understand what the trends are over the long term and to control those potential contaminant sources through a proper management plan. But recognize that the town will meet drinking water standards. They have to in order to be viable.
As far as the septic system that we put in place, I don't know, you know what I mean, if we can settle on if it's a zone 4, we need residential or conventional, you know what I mean? We only put in a pack bed media. But like I said, you have to get the letter of feasibility and then kind of move forward.
So again, ideally the discussion should be between the three of us unless it's really pertinent to the topic we're talking about, which I don't disagree that the septic is. For me specifically, obviously the septic system reduction is a huge point, but really for me, the point is the delineation processes. So the Bennett Spring, the old version that they did really is this, it's termed the non-preferred method because they just, and I don't want to call it purely arbitrary, but it really is a method that, and I wish I had the definition, I apologize, I left it on my desk, but to my understanding, it was going up 2 miles from the source, kind of finding a contour point and then creating what looks like a watershed delineation. In current conversations, even with the Division of Drinking Water, it's termed kind of the non-preferred method. They suggest that it should be used maybe in rural areas, but not necessarily a sufficient one for urban areas because they understand the impact of not going through a scientific process for delineation. So again, the delineation process should be one where they model it, they look at the lithology. So what they'll maybe do, or to my understanding, is they'll move water through the system, they'll see if it slows or if it stays steady, and they'll kind of come up with a measure that really says how quickly does the water move through the strata, and then they'll model it. You know, I would never support a variance in delineated source 2 and one that had gone through the scientific method. I don't see that there would be any reason to ever, you know, support a variance in that type of, again, a well delineated source protection zone. But on the 2 mile radius zone, I feel like the burden hasn't really been fulfilled for the water system to show that this should be an area that's restricted. So again, for me, of course, I would propose that they use the best advanced system for septic system, but it's not the nitrate reduction per se in the septic system. It's the delineation process for me, and understanding that, you know, there was an old method used. It could probably be legally challenged because they haven't borne the burden to really delineate through a scientific method, and that they have good new evidence showing at least what the delineation of the wishing well is, which is at current 100% of the flow. I mean, of course, it would be great to say, go through the process with the Division of Drinking Water, but we're here today in a variance hearing with all the data that we have. So for me, these are the factors that I'm considering. I think that leaves Gary.
That leaves me to weigh in on it, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
but we haven't formally voted, but.
So maybe one question still that I probably should have asked before we went into our technical committee airing, but Ron, what did you say the time was that you feel that the new study will change your zone protection areas?
The time frame?
Yeah.
Well, honestly, it's solely on my shoulders.
And I wasn't trying to put pressure on you, Ron, with that. I just wanted to try to.
I am familiar with the plan.
Yeah.
I can update the plan as soon as I get the data from Van. And so I'm comfortable that, and I want Van to tell me when he's going to give me the final data, but I'm comfortable within the time after, a month after I get the formal data from him, I think I can submit the plan. but I'm not familiar with how long it takes the state to process that.
That's the key point, that we can control our time. We can't necessarily control the speed at which the state reviews. But I can tell you, we have some influence there.
Is it,
I'll mention it just because it's on the tip of my tongue. The person that runs that section was an employee of mine for a while, and she's very good. She's very cautious with things like this, but I know we can facilitate things and get this through. And on my earlier discussions, she is comfortable with the methodology. We know that, so that will help the speed a bit. Her name is Deidre Lombardi Beck. And so to the extent that we can facilitate our work and get it through, I imagine within the next 3 to 6 months you'll see an approval, but that's depending on how quickly we move.
so maybe just a follow-up question to that, and I didn't mean to cut you off, Ron. Let's assume it takes 4 months, somewhere in the middle of that 3 to 6 months time process. Is it fair to say that if that rezoning takes place, this technical hearing may not even be necessary at that point?
I believe
I believe that would be the case. So what I would anticipate is that we would be copied via email about a proposed delineation, and then we would be copied on an email that would confirm that it was an approved delineation. So the only thing at that point, to my understanding, that might still be left out there is like the digital map per se.
Right.
So they would approve it, it would be fundamentally approved, then they would not be in a zone 2 is what the assumption is, obviously. And there would no longer be an ordinance that needed a variance.
Okay.
So the only thing that might be left out there is remnants of a digital file that would need to be altered, but we would not in any way consider that to not be in compliance with the county ordinance at the time.
So effectively, it would be a fairly safe assumption, and I'm looking to Cortland because we're going off experts council here to make a statement that it's very possible in a matter of months, everything would be in full compliance and none of this technical committee would need to even take place.
That's what I've heard from the explanation that's been provided.
And I would like to say on behalf of the town, I drink this water, so I am not motivated to, as a town, we are not motivated to approve something that's going to impact that. So I'm completely behind it, following what the scientific data tells us. And I know we have knowledgeable citizens out there that support me in that feeling also. And so we will.
Can I offer a thought? There are a lot of people who are really concerned about water. I think this one, you're being asked to make a variance because a process that we have an expert is saying he thinks that the answer is going to come out this way, and he's a man of great experience. I would say I would feel comfortable representing that this is something that has been very carefully looked at by the committee within this hearing room.
Good to hear. So to get back to the motions, we currently have a motion to table. Is that, do you still feel that way, Stan? Do you want to table it for future? And then if so, we would need a second to that.
I guess my question would be, if this data has been potentially completed and we're seeking the state to approve the new delineation, what's the urgency given the variance at this time when we're possibly only months away from the variance not being required? I'm not quite sure I understand the urgency now if we're that close to actually having a change made.
I wasn't aware we were that close, to be honest with you. And the letter of variance was just trying to move things forward, so we can try to break ground just, in the spring as soon as possible.
Well, I've talked to Whitney Call, and she says the urgency, which maybe she didn't communicate to you, is that she wants to get started this spring. And if this process takes 6 months, it will push this project out another year because it's such a short season up there. And that's why she's pushing this very.
She's basically 3 miles of dirt road to get, maybe 5. I mean, it's a ways up her property. And once snow hits, it's basically, it's shut down.
So I think we're still where, again, is your formal motion to get more data, to table it. So we either vote or table we make a motion to either vote formally or a motion to table it for a future meeting.
Is anybody on the committee supporting my initial?
I would say nay. I think we're gonna leave Gary in that spot.
Oh,
Sorry.
boy, thank you. I don't know that I'm feeling necessarily the same way, Stan, mostly because the type of system they're proposing is maybe for lack of a better term, kind of a tried and true tested system that does reduce and effectively treat for the concern in regards to nitrogen there. And so I'm not sure that I'm as worried or concerned about reanalyzing that. The only thing in my mind that really has kind of changed all of this that I wasn't aware of before this meeting was the study that Van had done that effectively changed the protection zones significantly. And if I missed that in the previous discussion, I apologize because that was kind of new information to me today. Is that fair to say? Did that information exist that I wasn't aware of, Chad or?
It came through when the report was submitted.
Well, this particular figure, this was, the redelineation, the red area happened yesterday.
Okay.
So, but the previous submittal was moving in this direction. It was that, it was part of the process to get to this. So
Gotcha.
You're right. Yeah, it's in progress.
Yeah, and had you sent it to me yesterday somewhere, I would have been irrelevant because I was tied up in other issues yesterday, so.
I can say that the information, as far as the septic system treatment is, it tracks with everything that we're seeing. We have a recent study from the Davis County area that we kind of participated in or partnered with. The outcome of it was really similar. I think that the total N actually was a lot higher for out of the septic tank effluent in that specific study, but it also tracked that there was a high level of reduction through the packed bed media systems. So it is a reduction. I think normally it seems to be a general thought that they can get down to about 10 milligrams per liter, but not to 2.5 milligrams per liter, which is a number used in a guidance document. But I think that as far as percentage reduction, I think that that's pretty fair and widely accepted for nitrate reduction, so total N reduction.
Which effectively puts them well within the range of what the state would require them to require the reduction to, right, then, essentially?
No, but the state's value that they have in their guidance document is very, very conservative. It really is meant to maybe be considered for something more typical like Ogden City water system, something where, again, the scientific method had been used for delineation. Again, for me, I think the real talking point here is the delineation methods and, the drilling of the wishing well, flow from the wishing well, knowing that, we actually looked at travel time of the wishing well, and fundamentally that the call property is not within a zone 2 of that wishing well, and likely or anticipating it not being within a zone 2 of the Bennett Spring complex once the source protection delineation is redone.
Okay. So yeah, I don't know that I would probably second the motion. Stan, do you still feel strongly that you'd like to?
No, I'm listening to the committee and public and professional input. This does sound, the idea is they've put the science into it, they've done the work, and provided that everything takes place with division drinking water. I'm still town as a municipality, because their part in this, along with the hydrologist, yeah, I don't think we need to go.
Okay, before we vote,
Water's a big deal right now, so.
before we vote, the very last thing I'd like to discuss is just simply that the packed media systems are required to do sampling every 6 months. Currently, it can be as simple as total dissolved solids. If they meet a total dissolved solid standard, then they don't have to do anything else, including E. coli or nitrogen or anything else. Is there any feeling that additional sampling requirements should be implemented on this packed media system? And I'm gonna continue and say, the applicant is proposing a packed media system, I think, to partner and make everybody feel really good. As far as the information collected on site from our office, without looking at the source protection, just purely on soil, they would have been permitted for a conventional septic system. So again, they're kind of going above and beyond, and, you know, a year down the line, if this plan is proposed and they're outside of the source, zone 2 source protection for the Bennett Spring, again, there would be no restriction placed on the system type. Is there any reason for additional sampling requirements to make people feel comfortable on this?
I kind of feel like they're going maybe above and beyond, maybe extra mile on this, and so I think, I don't see a need for additional testing or anything of
Okay,
that nature.
I would motion to vote then on it.
Okay,
Do you have a second?
yeah, I'd second that motion.
Okay. I vote yes to approve the variance based on the delineation practices and methodology, mainly from the information provided on the wishing well from the King's hydrology report.
I would second that.
Any special stipulations? All right, I would second as well.
Okay. All right, that concludes this meeting. I would motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second that as well.
Okay. All right, I'm just gonna talk to Felix about what next, I guess.